that I'm doing. Why is it not contagious? Good
Right.
afternoon, Amy and everyone. This is a joint session of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council with the Anchorage Advisory Committee. It is March 21st, 2019 and 1 p.m. The meeting's called to order, and I'm going to turn it over to the chairperson of the Anchorage Advisory Committee, which is Kathy Light.
Okay, I think we should, so everybody knows who everybody is, go around. I'm Kathy Light. I'm chair of the Anchorage Advisory Committee.
Sam Lurie. Sam Lurie.
Your vice chair.
Vice chair.
Ray Murphy, recently elected again to the town council and vice mayor at the moment.
Greg Holmes on the Anchorage committee. Bruce Butcher, town council.
Sam Bowles, just a citizen.
Ted Lowell, committee member.
Mike Ratliff, committee member.
Bill Kubicek, committee member.
Roxanne Hassefrost, Town Council. Joanne Champ, Town Council.
Mr. Bowles, at work sessions, we don't usually allow public input from the public. Were you here to give input on something particular?
Yeah, I want to know why they're trying to get rid of us out of the Anchorage, what the problem is. Now, it concerns me, so I figured I'd
Okay.
post it someplace downtown. So
If you wouldn't mind, just sitting in the audience chairs, we'll ask that question for you. Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. You're good. You're good.
Yes, we have Austin Gilchrist, Harbor Master with Chelsea, is also here at Public Works, and Roger Hernstadt as well, town manager.
You know what? I'm feeling like you and I could do a PBS skit. And now, this is Kathy Light.
Yes, both of us have the same thing, I think.
It's more like a Saturday Night Live, but never mind.
That's what I mean. Exactly. Exactly. And we need Alec Baldwin right here.
Okay, I hope everybody at the table has. I just a couple weeks ago was in touch with Chelsea about if we should have some agenda items today, and I just wrote down 4 items that we've been discussing, and additional, then a 5th column for additional AAC member items. But just to get started, I'm sure maybe town council has some things they'd like to talk to us about, but these are things we've been talking about, so maybe we can start with that. Number 1 was a Coast Guard designated special anchorage area. We've been tossing this idea around since the mooring field went in 2004. Does that help? I think so. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't.
And I wrote a little bit about what a special anchorage area is, which is it's a Coast Guard designated area that appears on charts. And one of the things that you don't have to do in a Coast Guard anchorage area is leave anchor lights on overnight. That's one of the things. I think there's some other protections and whatnot, but in 2007, Coastal Engineering, who works with us with the mooring balls, and everybody had gotten all the paperwork together with the Coast Guard to get it done. And the town council at that time just kind of let it go. And we've been off and on trying to get that done. Is there more to the Anchorage area that one of the other committee members would like to add? Anyway, Mark Kincaid of Coastal Engineering has been working to get this done. There are several of them in Florida, and he got close, and then there was Coast Guard personnel change, and there was this and that. And essentially, at a meeting or two ago, we've talked to him about it over the years, and he would be willing to work on it, but he's kind of reached the point where he would like council to say we want to go ahead or we don't.
So you need a specific action from the town council.
That we would like him to pursue this.
Okay. Joanne?
Well, hate to start right off as a naysayer, but I do have a problem with it. I was looking at the aerial view. I'm out there boating a lot. I mean, the channel is very narrow, and I noticed that it says areas so designated should be well removed from fairways and located where general navigation will not endanger or be endangered by unlighted. And that is immediately adjacent to the U.S. Federal Channel. And the Key West Ferry comes in and out at night. I know that's a professional ship, but it comes in after dark. The shrimp boats come in and out. We've had one decapitation out there in the field. We have a lot more boats and a lot less experienced people with boat rentals. And I'm very concerned from a safety and liability point of view. I'm a sailor. I'm used to always having my anchor lights on at night from a security point of view. It makes me feel safe, and I know it's an inconvenience for people who may be long-term on the buoys. I mean, some people are there year-round, I think. But, you know, with the new LED lights and the new bulbs, LED bulbs, like from Marine Beam and stuff that don't interfere with radios, my point of view is safety liability. I would personally not be in favor. I think that that's very narrow. And especially if we're thinking about expanding the Anchorage area up further too, it's sort of going to be a new thing for boaters coming in, a change. And so, but I'm just one person.
Roxanne, you have a comment on it?
I agree. It's not coming through, I don't think. I agree with Joanne.
Look what happens at lunch. You know. Ray.
I just have a question. Are there any other advantages besides the not having to do the light?
Yeah, you're on the charts.
Well,
You're on the chart.
Well, explain that to me.
You're on the charts.
Yeah, all the navigational charts will have a designated anchor on it, so you'll know a mooring field is coming up in front of you when you're motoring into the town at night. Right now, they're not on our charts. We would like to have it on the charts.
And it has to be Coast Guard, whatever.
Yeah,
To-
why would they put it on there?
I don't know.
They won't.
It's not my area. But, well, that's interesting.
Yeah, the Coast Guard won't put it just on there because we have a mooring field. It has to be a designated anchorage area.
So could we still require lights, anchor lights on, and still be a designated? So we're on the charts, but we require lights
That
on because
would be
the
something
safety
we
issue?
could require as a mooring field under our rules and regulations.
That would be a good compromise.
Okay.
That'd be a good compromise.
My question is that working? Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, it is, Bruce.
My question is, how many people are not putting on their anchor lights tonight or at night now? Do we have any idea?
Well, I know that they're patrolling out there, and we don't have the actual figures, but they are ticketing people. Is that correct, Austin? Do you have any figures about how many people are and aren't? Yes.
Austin, if you want, you could just come here and sit next to Joanne. Or next to Bill, whichever one. Chelsea, you want to come sit down too?
Fort Myers Beach Harbor Master. Yeah, in the past, what has happened is when we first recognized the complaint of the anchorage lights, law enforcement did go through and start enforcing the anchor lights at night. We did get a lot of complaints from people who've been back there for a while of being knocked on at night and getting ticketed at night. But the whole thing was just getting everybody to burn their anchor lights at night. So there has been tickets. I believe there was 27 tickets written when we did do that, and now it's just a consecutive. It's more of an informational push at this point, other than just ticketing, because we initially went through and ticketed everybody that wasn't burning anchor lights. But now it's more, once the newer people coming in, we're more of informing them that you need to get this fixed. This is a requirement, and if they still ignore that, then a ticket is issued.
So you're saying they're getting a warning first?
Yeah, just to comply with it, or just to let them know that this is the standard, because it is a mooring
to
field,
do
and
it.
like you said, if you do go into a mooring field that's charted, it is custom that not to burn the light. So, but us not being designated as an anchorage area, that you are required to burn a light.
Wait, you just said if you go into a mooring field that is charted, it's not required.
That's correct.
Got it.
And that's
So
why
if we required it, that would be something different. But what if we put it on the agreement people had to sign when they come in?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so do we have Sam?
Yeah, Sam for the record.
Look, I took right over for you.
I had a question about the enforcement. I think that's a great compromise, except if we do that, someone that doesn't have their light on, it would have to be enforced by us rather than the Coast Guard probably, because it wouldn't be under their jurisdiction anymore.
We are actually dealing with this right now with docks on land in the boats, but the thing is having the support of Lee County Sheriff's Department and also our code enforcement here, and just following up on the infractions that we do ticket.
Well, it's a huge plus having it on the charts, and if we could get the mandatory lighting in our agreement, that would be great.
To be clear, who does the ticketing?
It depends on what the infraction is. If
The
it's
lights.
The lights would be Lee County Sheriff,
Okay, not the Coast Guard.
not the Coast Guard. No.
Okay, so item number 1 we'll bring back to the council in a form of, John, are you hearing this? Yes, so number 1 will come back for approval to the council. Okay,
Could we just not say we have consensus today? Would that be enough for you, Kathy, to?
Yeah. We just wanted to bring it before council to see if you want to go forward with it or not.
I think you've got consensus, so if that's enough for you and we don't have to actually put it on the agenda, it saves time.
I think we have to approve this.
Okay.
I
Do you
thought
think-
she just wanted to assure this gentleman that he wasn't going to do a bunch of work and then have us ignore it.
But does there have to be an approval of the council? That's the question.
Essentially, Mark Kincaid at Coastal Engineering wanted the council to agree that we should go forward with it. He wanted
A letter.
something from the council that is that correct, Chelsea?
I will, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'll refer to John Herron on this, but given that we are going to be spending town budgeted funds on this, I suggest that we go back to council and get a formal approval.
My opinion is all these decisions should be memorialized via a formal approval and the resolution, so people can find it without having to scroll through minutes to find out what
I agree.
a particular
Okay.
body took, action a
Okay.
body took. So.
Then I just need to ask a question. I was under the impression that once he does the paperwork, then we would approve it, but he was just wanting to know that, yes, we're going to pay attention to this. He didn't want to do a bunch of work and then have us ignore it like happened last time. So I understand that we need to approve it. I just think it's later in the process.
Perhaps. I mean, he just needed the idea that council was okay for us to him to start. I mean, this is going to be a long-term process. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But
if he needs funding, then that has to fund the
that
funding
if he needs
request has
funding to
come
do
us.
it, then it has to come before you.
Yeah, he's not gonna do it for free.
Right. It's going to.
So, Roger, perhaps you could reach out to Mark, see what he needs, and then decide whether it's agenda or not agenda.
Full agenda, the appropriate item.
Okay. Next one, Kathy.
Okay. Expansion of the mooring field west of the bridge. This has been talked about for some years, off and on, by a council member. We kind of brought it up. There are a lot of boats out there by the Coast Guard station and that area west of the bridge. And I also reached out to Mark Kincaid on the question of what it would take to put in mooring balls. Now, part of the issue with that is it would be very expensive to do it because you have the whole land lease, state and federal permitting, $4,000 a system, not including the anchor. It's also very shallow there, but right now, our mooring field, if it's completely full, it's not for very long. And a lot of the reason why those boats are there, one of the reasons I believe, and maybe some other committee members can address this too, is that we instituted an insurance requirement a couple of years ago again.
We did.
And I think a lot of those boats don't have insurance, for one thing. Also, a lot of people just like to anchor out. They don't want to pay the fee. Our boat is self-sufficient, so we like to anchor out when we can too. So I think there's a lot of reasons why those boats are there. If we put mooring balls there, those boats are not going to go on the mooring balls necessarily. That's my feeling. Maybe some other members of our committee can talk about that, talk about what's going on out there and their feelings about it.
Mike, you got any feelings on it?
Well, Mike Ratliff, I agree with Kathy. I think this is something which is a can of worms, which is not worth the expense or the trouble, quite honestly. Let's just say, for example, you are one of those boats, and we go ahead and put in more mooring balls and go to the expense of doing that. And those boats, if they want to be in Fort Myers Beach, they will go further into the back bay. That is exactly what they will do, because they are not interested in being on a mooring ball for any number of reasons. And as to the insurance thing, the history on that is one, I've been on the committee, I think with Bob Beasley from the original committee. When we first put the mooring field in, we did have an insurance requirement, and I think we found at that time that it inhibited people coming into our mooring field. We then got permission from the then town council a few years later to do away with the insurance requirement, and now we're back to where we were. So I don't really have a explanation as to why, but again, I think those boats, those people which are in those boats, they're not interested in being in the mooring field, insurance or otherwise. I think that's what they wish to do. It's a much more economical way for them to do it. They still have access to our dinghy dock because it is one which must be accessible to the public. So I don't see the expansion of the mooring field as being any way solves any issues for us, really.
Okay.
Can you answer me a question? How did this come to this? How did this item come up? Doesn't seem to be anybody who's interested in it at all.
It was a former council person that was kind of pushing it for a couple years.
Okay, so there's no demand. There's no demand for this.
I don't think so. It's just been something that's been brought up over the years to us to.
What are the statistics of the occupancy rate on the balls in season?
Can I make a quick comment? Yeah. I wanted to defer to Austin because he's the one out there.
I was just looking at him.
I have just a couple questions. The first one is, like, how many weeks over the last couple years are we at full occupancy? And maybe you can explain to everyone what you do during the off season about reducing the amount of balls for out there to just the amount of capacity we have.
Okay, as far as the operation of the field during this time, we are usually at capacity for the busiest seasons of the month. Usually last month, this month, and next month we're typically completely full, and then we start tapering off from there. And then from history, we just kind of start taking the pennant lines off of the balls to reduce any growth on the systems, and that reduces any service that we may need to do to those systems that aren't going to be used. But as far as, does that answer the questions?
Yeah, do we know how many people we're turning away during full occupancy?
Full occupancy, we usually not turning anybody away. We usually just put them on a hook until we can schedule them to come in, because we do have advanced in to tell them, look, we have a ball freeing up at this time or this time. So as far as turning people away, we try to not do that. But here, it's not it's not a large number that we are turning away.
How many balls are on the field?
We have 70 complete.
So you're running over 60 4 months out of the year, it looks like, in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So you're getting close to
capacity. Yeah.
Austin, what are your thoughts about expanding?
Okay, the north of the mooring field right there, the way that I view that is that's the first thing you see coming into our island, and that's the last thing you see coming out of our island. And what we're getting now is people bringing in boats, especially since the Bimini Basin's been closed. They're bringing boats in there and dumping them. That's the quickest point to bring them, and they can make an easy access. Right now I have one sunken boat there and 3 boats that are derelict that the Sheriff's Department and WCIND is working on. And also I get multiple complaints about navigational hazards there because those boats are not regulated, so they can drop anchor wherever they choose. And the problem is the swing radius, and any of the crabbers or fishermen coming through there, they're impeding the waterways there. So it's pretty much choking the channel off, and at this time, the influx that we have now is some of the most of the boats we've ever had in that area. So it is presenting hazards to that area as well, and I'm trying my hardest to get these people to pump out, but I'm getting a little resistance in there, but we've asked the help from the Lee County Sheriff's Department to go in, and we're going through all the statutes, what it takes as far as operating your MSD, and trying to enforce all the MSD in that area as well.
What's an MSD?
The marine sanitation device. It's
Okay.
usually what holds their sewage, and it's not regulated. And that's the problem in there. And they're pretty much doing whatever they want. We do most of the problems that happen on Fort Myers Beach as far as crime and stuff like that has been traced back to that area because of there's not, I wouldn't say the quantity of people, but there's certain people in that area that make the area a lot bigger than what it looks like. It's just one or two, and we're working on eliminating those one or two people and just enforcing the statutes. And right now, we've got one of them banned, and now we've got to figure out a way to remove their vessels.
Joanne.
I'm not quite sure what your answer means. If we do the designated anchorage area, and it were to include the other side of the bridge, what does that provide to you? Does that provide something?
I thought we were talking about expanding the mooring field.
That's what I mean. If we expand the mooring field and it's included in this
Anchorage area?
special anchorage area, does that assist in the problem that you're discussing?
Yeah, well, if we can enforce the regulations that we have for the mooring field as far as standards of vessels and MSD, scheduled pump outs and stuff like that, then yes, that will eliminate the problem because then we have the right to go in there and actually regulate that area. And right now we don't. So everybody just pretty much does what they want in there, and then whenever Lee County can get in there to regulate, we've got to find the statutes to regulate those statutes.
So even if we put a limited number of mooring balls in there, like say 10, but had a certain anchorage area defined, even if we didn't use all of it, it would allow you to better patrol the area or not?
Yeah, if we were able to put a 10-ball mooring system in there, that would regulate that area, and nobody can drop anchor within 150 feet of a mooring field. So that would regulate a buffer around 150 feet of that area as well. So it would eliminate a lot of the unregulated boats coming in and anchoring, and then not only that, the also scarring of the environmental impact of anchors dragging and constantly up and down. And that's a big part of a mooring field as well. The footprint of moorings are a lot smaller than dropping anchor. So there's an environmental impact as well.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, I think we have to be careful here about exchanging terms, discussing what is within the mooring field and what is out on anchorage. By federal law, for example, you are free to anchor in waters of the United States. That is the law. As to the enforcement of MSD regulations and what have you outside the mooring field, which I think is specifically what we're talking about now, I do not see that personally as a law enforcement role that we should play. I see that as something that the other, whether it be Florida Wildlife or the Lee County Sheriff's Department, those are the people who should be, in fact, doing that. Because I think we get into some sketchy areas here as to what is town responsibility, federal waters responsibility, and those kinds of things. We had a bit of this discussion yesterday. As far as MSDs go, we're all against that. But until we have more real data about what is going on, when I hear things, with all due respect, that these are the people who are causing large numbers of crime or are in fact damaging the environment or in fact doing all these things, I need more long-term data before I begin to make really serious expenditures and changing the whole mooring field issue.
Bruce, were you going to say something?
Yeah, well, I forgot where it was, but at any rate, your discussion about the swing radius of people on hooks coming into the channel seems concerning to me, and that if the mooring fill would preclude that, then that's a benefit. It seems like to me, I like what Austin had to say. I was moved to think more about expanding the mooring fill as a result of his comments.
Well, it's a complicated issue, and I understand Austin's thing with this. One of the issues in that area is it's very shallow, and it doesn't really have the depth. If you look out at a lot of those boats, some of them are actually med-moored or double-moored because not to swing in there. So it would be restrictive to a lot of craft. There's a lot to go through if we decide to do that. You have to get a whole new submerged land lease, which is very expensive and time-consuming, and federal permitting, and the mooring systems, just the system, are about $4,000, not including the helix, not including all of the startup costs for all of that. And again, we're not at capacity. I mean, I don't think we've had the mooring field completely full very many days this year. I have a boat out there, and I go out there, and there have been mooring balls available. So I think personally, it's a big expenditure for what we would gain.
Yeah, again, if our issue is that these people are out there and some of them are not abiding by the statutes, that is a law enforcement issue. It is, and what I see is some, if we put the mooring balls in there, that's a way, if I understand what I'm hearing correctly, that we will eliminate those people. Well, we will not eliminate those people. We will eliminate those people from that area,
that spot.
But they will simply relocate somewhere else. So I don't think, given the expenditures that would be involved and the time and the effort to put in additional mooring balls out there, will in fact solve the issue, which I believe the issue is if people are incorrectly anchored and are in fact encroaching on the channel, that is a ticketable offense. And there are law enforcement agencies which can do that for us, but they need to be there doing it. And so that's kind of and I understand that.
Greg, what were you going to say?
I was just going to add that I don't see how a feasibility study is going to show it's a suitable mooring field. It's too shallow. Boats are always swinging, getting grounded. You got one now grounded. It's been there for over a month or two. And if they do move into deeper water, they swing into the fairway, which then they definitely get ticketed. And so just let the law enforcement handle it. They have to have their lights on. They have to anchor suitably. It'd be a really hard one for us to regulate. I don't even know if you can fit mooring balls that are correctly. It's way more narrow in our mooring field now. There's hardly room for one boat at a time. You can't even line up two. They'll swing at each other or swing into shallow land, or they'll swing into the fairway. You cannot put two in a row. I have my boat there. I mean, I'm at the pink shell, but I would love them to be gone. But they have a right. They're U.S. citizens. They have the right to anchor. I don't know why we should be so tough not being that boater friendly. They should be able to anchor somewhere.
You said U.S. citizen. If you were Canadian, you're not allowed to anchor there.
I don't know. I just know
Yeah,
U.S.
they
citizens
can.
have the right
They
to
can.
anchor there.
Anyway, okay. I was just curious. What? Yeah, Bruce.
So do we have any input from like the Coast Guard or the Lee County Sheriff or Florida Fish and Game on this subject? Do they have any comments about that, about enforcement or concerns or?
Yeah, they've come to our meetings a couple of times and bring us up to speed with the things they're doing with some of the issues that Austin was bringing up about, enforcement of anchoring and different kinds of things, yeah.
So what do they say
About?
that anchoring area that seems to be?
Well, they haven't talked specifically about that area. It's just areas around, the boats that are anchored.
Last sweep, there was 53 tickets issued and 2 arrests in that area.
In that specific area?
Yeah, that was the area they targeted during that project or program.
2 arrests?
2 arrests.
What were the arrests for?
2 outstanding warrants.
Wow.
Well, they're not in our mooring field.
Well, if you pursue the special Anchorage area and we find that the numbers are increasing, there's the potential, obviously, to put this on again and after that and see how full we are. I still feel that if it assists law enforcement in that area, that we ought to think about pursuing it. I know it's an initial expense, but the Anchorage does make money and it does bring a lot of people, business.
If I may just give my point of view on it, like I said, cosmetically it's not a good look for the town to have just random boats just laying in there, sunk boats and derelict boats laying there, especially if that's the first thing you see coming into our town by boat. And foremost, moving forward with the complaints about money and time and this to do it, I just got to say we already have a mooring field and we've done it before. So it is doable, it's achievable, and we know the benefits of it. And as far as enforcement goes and regulating, we're already enforcing and regulating, and we're not getting into any legal binds whatsoever. We're operating within the standards of what we've set forth. So as far as moving forward, I would just like to use the example of the mooring field we are already operating as an example of how it would run out there. Because there's no difference in opening those 10 balls versus how we would operate if we are with the 70 balls. And with that as well, the revenue coming in, that's 10 more revenues that we can. And because it's not there, that's why we don't have an example of what it could be. We can say what ifs and what ifs, but until it's put in and it becomes accustomed to everybody coming in and out, it might be an opportunity for those people to anchor there. And I believe that we've already had a depth and a ball mock-up of it being done. So it is doable as far as depth, swing radiuses, and how many balls we can fit in there. That process has already been done, so it is doable.
Could I ask a question about that particular thing? The swing radiuses that I saw were larger, took larger boats. Is there enough water for the larger boats? They had 100-foot swing radiuses, and they were larger than the ones we have. Do we ever have to turn away boats because of the the length of the boat?
I don't remember us turning any away now. I know that we did have a problem with ball 1 was occupied by somebody that it was a derelict vessel that sat in there for years, and that one, ball 3 and ball 5 behind it are our 3 biggest radius balls. And so that was our only bind, but now that that's gone, we won't put anybody on ball 1 that is undersized for an extended amount of time, so we will always have something available for larger vessels is the way that we're operating now.
Can we see that plan mock-up of the extended mooring field?
Chelsea
We've never seen it.
Yeah, I think Chelsea's grabbing it, but
that'd be great. Maybe it looks good. To me, it just didn't look feasible. I'm always running around in a dinghy over there, so I'm not sure how you have bigger boats over there. It's very shallow. Time it's above water.
Well, if we become a special Anchorage area and we actually get charted, we may indeed get a lot more boats in here, which is what we'd like to everybody would like that, I think. The boating community would like that. Those who boat would like more places to go that they know about, and those who run businesses on the island would like more visitors.
I'm assuming that's why we wanted it on the charts, was to make it more attractive, to bring more people in. If not, then why would we want it?
Well, like I say, I think that act would be ahead of the ball because it's eventually going to have to be done, especially with the growth of the town and what we expect to do. I just think it would be a responsible thing to just go ahead because it will be a timely process to do it. So at the rate of the town's growing, I think that it would be a responsible choice to go ahead and try to federally designate that area because it's eventually going to have to happen. Why? Because we're operating a mooring field here and we're expanding. Well, town-wise.
Sam, for the record, this is a great debate because I think it is really narrow. That's definitely the downside of it. And another good reason to keep it as an anchorage rather than part of the mooring field is it's right in the view of the Coast Guard. And over the history of the whole mooring field and Anchorage, they're just going to go back behind Salty Sam's, a lot of them. The main thing that I can just see for people wanting to be in that section is they can dinghy to Boatage Point. It's really hard to get to a beach area without taking your boat off of the ball or the mooring, and that area might be really attractive, and it might be the first to be rented out if people could get to Boatage Point or get to Pink Shell for the amenities.
You know, the note I just made to myself was branding. So to address for you guys who weren't here earlier, we were looking at some logos and things for signage at the bridges, and we're talking about in our strategic plan the brand of Fort Myers Beach. So to Austin's issue about this is our front door, it's the first and last impression. I think I think it could be valid to address this and clean it up.
I think you should even expand it further, because you know a lot of the boats that are anchored now are in front of the Pink Shell. That's not we haven't gone that far. Why didn't we go further out? Even add more.
And I have one other question, just to clarify. I see the federal channel and then the 100-foot right-of-way, 100-foot right-of-way. Is that the Florida major channel, the one that's designated for dredging? What's the indication? Is that like what you call the intercoastal then? I'm just trying to understand what
the buffer zone.
It's a right-of-way. It's just a right-of-way buffer zone.
Yeah.
You have to be a certain, like the mooring field has to have a buffer zone out from the channel.
Right.
The mooring field has to have a buffer zone out from the channel, sorry.
Austin, what do you say to Greg's comment about expanding it further west?
I'll have to talk to Mark Kincaid. I know he has his reasons of why he did just the 10 balls here, and I believe depth was an issue on expanding it. Or was there 8?
There's
I'm
8
sorry.
here.
So yeah, and I think the 10 was the projected number, but I think the depth was the issue with that.
There's some pretty big boats in front of Pink Shell.
Yeah.
And they're like 36, 42
Oh,
footers.
moving it toward.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll have to ask Mark Kincaid who.
They think that's deeper water, I think.
Really?
It's pretty deep by Pink Shell there.
Either that or it might come too close to the channel as well. So
This canal here, this is Matanzas Court, isn't it?
So they're still going to anchor there then.
Well, let's,
Yeah, there's still going to be people that are going to anchor further out
there will be
along there.
buffer zone for
yeah, Bill Kubicek, on the committee, my concern is that most of those people that anchor out do not use our sanitation thing, and they dump their sanitation right into the water. And I come from Lake Erie, and if you do that, they test your, in Canada and United States, and if you do not have the proper disposal of waste, why, they immediately seize your boat and sell it. It's gone.
Wow.
And so it isn't done there.
Austin, is anybody using vouchers in that area right now for pump out?
Yeah, we have, there are boats in there that will pump out, especially since the last Lee County Sheriff's Program. It really stepped up everybody in there, and then everybody's trying to get their heads and everything operable, but we still are running into a lot of people who just try to ignore the whole program in general, so it's just a constant on-go with them.
Can you tell council, in case they don't know about the voucher program?
So anybody outside the mooring field, we do have a pump out program that comes with our mooring field. When you do sign up, you can get as many pump outs as you want. As far as the Anchorage field and all of the canals and pretty much anywhere within our waters, we do have the boat, and it's a $5 voucher, and we'll come pump you out wherever you are.
For $5?
$5. So Chelsea O'Reilly, we are restricted because of the grant that we received for the purchase of this pump out boat, and the most that we can charge is $5.
Which is the deal. The going rate's around $25, $30.
Yeah.
So, and I tell all the boys out there, you got to go in our town and get it cheaper. You even get a better discount.
So anything that council could do to encourage the pump outs, I don't know whether through publicity or just people knowing about it, would be great.
I'm just going to bring this up about our website again. Michelle, you know, when I raise something like this, I'm not pointing at you like, why haven't you, or why have you, or what, it's not that at all. But do we have a section on the website that says for boaters
As of 2 days ago.
to talk about the mooring field, the pump out voucher. I mean, I think that people go to that as a resource for information about everything. And this could be another reach out of information that we could do. Just as an idea, add it to our list. So would this expansion maybe be a good idea to add, if Mark Kincaid actually comes to us, to have him opine as well, Roger, at that time, just as a brief.
Listening to the conversation, yes, we're glad to make sure that Mark is present. So, if the council has any questions they would like to direct to Mark, they can. So, I'm trying to think of an analogy that would work. It was kind of like if you had a hotel and then you let RVs park in your parking area for nothing. That's kind of the situation that we have. So there's one of the things you have to think about is that if people can take advantage of all the amenities of being in the mooring field without having to pay the mooring field cost, of course, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to do that. So one of the things we could think about is how do we say to the person, look, if you want to be on a hook, you could be on a hook, but if you want to use our dinghy docks and take advantages of our other programs that we may make available, what we currently make available and may make available in the future, you're going to have to be paying the same rate as if you were in the mooring field. And that would be an inducement. Once you're paying the same rate to access those amenities to be in the mooring field, you might as well be in the mooring field. So it's really how do we get from where we are today to that position?
Well, all our dinghy docks are open to the public, and the vouchers are available for everybody. So they're really the public is getting a benefit of the mooring field, and I don't see any way, that analogy, I don't see any way that they're not going to benefit the way we're set up now, whether they're on the hook.
Just something for you to think about.
We can't charge for the dinghy docks. The grants that they were developed with, they're open to the public. Anybody can use them. They don't get the showers and the water and the things that the mooring field does. That's not available to them. But it's not really the same as parking an RV in a parking lot. I'm sorry, it's just not the same. It's open to the public, water to anchor in, and it's really not the same.
But Kathy, if somebody on the hook somewhere out there came to Matanzas and asked for those resources,
no, they can't. We don't have enough capacity really for our mooring field at this point. There are mooring fields I've anchored out, and there have been marinas and different things that you can pay a fee and get a shower and do that kind of thing, but we only have 2 showers. We don't have those facilities open to anybody else but the people in our mooring field. The water I'm not so sure about. I think anybody can probably do the water, but as far as the rest of the amenities, the shoreside amenities, we barely have enough for the patrons of our mooring field, so they're not open to anybody else.
So do we have any consensus from the council on the expansion?
I would like that at some point in time, if we were to make a decision about that we see the total scope of what that mooring field could be down towards Pink Shell. And,
so
I don't know
Austin,
if that's
could we
2
ask
more
Mark
or
to do
20
that?
more, just to have an understanding.
And can we get the depth at high and low tide?
That would be good too.
Good request. Also, if I might just add, this thing about anchoring in waters, this has been going on in Florida for at least 10 to 15 years. I've actually attended some of the court battles of this. We've seen it in Marco Island. We see it currently in parts of Miami Beach. And so I'm not sure how far we want to go down the road of trying to be the enforcer of what boats are doing in federal waters. You can, by law, you can anchor where you like. And there are laws, again, about MSDs and those sorts of things. And to me, this goes back to a law enforcement issue. And that falls into the hands of Florida Wildlife and the Lee County Sheriff. I think Austin said that there were 57 tickets, or at least sightings of people. I would be curious to know what those were for, and how many of them were for, in fact, a violation like things like the MSD. And if that is what primarily they were for, then it would seem to me that you go on board that boat as the proper law enforcement officer, and you tell them to leave, or you put a lock, or whatever. There are ways to approach this issue without getting into what I think could be a real, all we would need is one person to say, you cannot prohibit me from anchoring my boat here. And it could get into all sorts of legal issues,
Even
I would
in
say.
an Anchorage area?
In federal waters, you are allowed to anchor your vessel.
So in the middle of our mooring field?
Not in the more, no.
Well,
And
that's the point. Nobody is saying that we should go out there and give them tickets that if they're not in the mooring field. We're saying expand the mooring field so they can't anchor there.
yes, but if I understand what we're talking about now, we're talking about boats which are not in the mooring field and ticketing those.
No, I don't think so.
Those 57 tickets were not issued to people who were on the west side of the bridge?
They weren't by the town.
No, exactly. And so my point is that that is something which is for law enforcement outside the town.
And that was law enforcement outside.
Right, right. So it's being done.
Austin, perhaps you could give the committee an ask for an update on what those, or you have it on your phone.
I'm texting the officer now. I'm going to see if she can give me a breakdown of what exactly was issued out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so how do we move forward on this item? A further discussion at the town council, or perhaps more review with Mark Kincaid and the committee? If Mark could come forward with some more explicit direction or a greater encompassing map and suggestion, then
Might Mark bring it right to an M&P since there's some support for town council?
I think it's a good idea. Yes.
Bring it straight to town council with the extra, the high tide, low tide depths.
Yes.
And the whatever, and then maybe Anchorage advisory can also send comment.
Okay. Well, and you probably, I have from a year ago when this was kind of brought to us, an email from him giving a somewhat breakdown of materials, labor, costs. This was very preliminary, but he can give you a little bit more information about the process and what it's really going to cost.
Okay, so that's a good idea. Management and planning.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Just for everyone's benefit, there are some extremely successful mooring operations run by municipalities throughout the state. And it might be good for folks to take a look at what some of our peers are doing and how they're doing it, maybe to give you all some...
We actually have, over the years, contacted Boot Key, Sarasota, St. Pete, we Vero Beach, we have. Yeah.
Good. For the council members who may not have or not be aware of that information, just so you know, there are some, as Kathy mentioned, some very successful mooring operations out there and marinas operated by municipalities.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next item. That the expansion will go to a management and planning after we get information from Mr. Kincaid.
Mayor Sarceda?
Yes.
I just wanted to mention on the town council, or on the town's website, on the main page, there's a list of quick links. One of them is the mooring field.
Great.
And when you click on it, it talks about the mooring field, the rental agreement, rental fees, the dinghy dock, there's cruiser information and a map.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
In fact, Austin at our meeting yesterday encouraged our members to go on the website and to take a look at what's on there and to make suggestions about things that we would like to add, which I haven't had time to do yet, but I think that's a project for us before our next meeting.
So your next item, Kathy?
The next item is one that that it was brought to us before Christmas. I can't remember exactly, about running the mooring field in-house instead of through a service provider. And we have had some preliminary discussions, and we're trying to get some financial information about doing that and some other information. We had the finance person, director, thank you, come yesterday. But we're having trouble getting some numbers of actual numbers. I kind of did a little bit and went back and found some of the informational things with finance, and we're trying to get some numbers about whether it makes sense to do that number-wise, money-wise.
With Mr. Lang?
With Mr. Lang, yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So.
Could I
Please.
comment on that?
Please.
I've been chasing the numbers now for 5 years, and I'm not certain that the financial is the question that is the most important.
Right.
The city, the town needs the support. The problem is, how are we going to do it, and how are we going to make it work? And I think that's something the committee needs to work on a whole lot more before deciding. And I personally, having chased the numbers, they're not that far off. And it sounded like Mr. Lang felt it was feasible. That was my interpretation. He didn't say that. But I think there are many other questions about doing this that need to be answered, and I think the committee needs a lot more time before making the final decision, but I would like to see us continue to investigate.
I agree with Ted. We haven't really discussed it to make a recommendation as a committee, and I agree it's more than just financial. I think there's a lot of other things to think about besides that, and we really haven't had the time to really talk about that. I think it's on our agenda for next meeting. And so we as a committee really haven't come to a consensus, I don't think.
I think it's also a matter of comparing apples to apples. There's a lot of things that Matanzas have amenity-wise, and there's a couple downfalls too, considering some of the hours that some of the things are open that the town could probably do a better job with, but it's going to have to be comparing apples to apples and decide what our priorities are with amenities, locations, and other things.
Yes, Joanne.
Could you elaborate just slightly on what you mean looking at other things? And I'll tell you why I ask. Because the town is investing right now in looking at Bayfront Park, Heart of the Island, these different areas. And it's very timely for us. And we've just put in for a matching grant for a dock or pier at Bayfront Park. It's very timely for us to consider in any design in that area if we might undertake something like this on the property that we have. So from your point of view, what is it that goes beyond finances that you were wanting to look at?
Well, I think one of the main things is location and how far it is from the field, and it also has to do with how is it going to be staffed and what surrounding facilities are available in the same location. I have to think a moment. Whether we can have enough washers and dryers, enough showers for 70 balls, and get it in a price range that we want to do. I know it's being studied now, but we really haven't compared in the committee yet the present facilities, exactly what's available, and the ones that might be proposed. So it needs a lot more. The present facilities right in the middle of town, and that, I mean, you can't get much closer to Times Square. anything else is going to be further away. The other thing is that there's always the chance that Matanzas is in the process of reconfiguring or redoing their place, and if we decide at this time that we are not going to do it, then they make those 2 units back into units, and we may lose the opportunity for the future should our attempt not come off. So I'm hesitant to think. I really like the idea, but I haven't in my own head come up with all the cons, the negatives, and I may still in the long run say, yeah, I think it should be done, but at this point I just don't have enough information, and I don't think the committee has had the opportunity to discuss it in a way that we could say right today we want to do it.
Has Public Works or anything, or Austin, have you guys thought or talked about this at all? Did you have any thoughts on that location or design?
We actually we do have a couple potential locations. I just wanted to be clear what Matanzas is providing the town. They are our upland service provider, so that includes laundry facilities, restrooms, showers, washers and dryers, and then just they take the new patrons coming in, and it's like a check-in system. So the extra amenities like an ice machine aren't necessary according to our submerged land lease and agreement with the state, but those are the basic amenities that we are required to have. Anything additional that you may see at other mooring fields is just kind of a bonus or an extra. We have looked into the potential, Austin and I, of taking this in-house. We did run some numbers with the finance director. I think with the staff that we have, and the field is growing, we see that. We're becoming a destination when it comes to the mooring field, that we could look into, you know, if it's a property or if it's a trailer, that it's definitely something to look towards in the future, and even potentially budget for. I know our agreement with Matanzas ends the end of this year. We could renew it for up to 2 more years. So that's something that we're looking to work with AAC and council on moving forward with.
If we had to build a structure for the showers and restrooms, facilities, laundry, would that have to be on a movable trailer like at the beach?
Depends on the location. If it's a property or if it's a right-of-way, that really makes the difference.
Really? I don't understand that.
Well, if it's a property, you have the parcel, you have all the restrictions. We might have to rezone a property if it's the right-of-way. Just like the restroom, it had to be a movable.
I mean, I'm talking about, yeah, from a FEMA standpoint, does it have to be a movable
we would have
device?
to be able to.
It depends on if it meets the criteria of a structure, depending on what you put there. If it meets the criteria of a structure, it would have to meet the building code, and if it doesn't meet the criteria of a structure, it has to be movable. So it really depends what you would. So for example, what Chelsea I think is trying to say is, if you had a piece of town-owned dirt and you wanted to put a structure on it, then of course it wouldn't have to meet all the building code, and you wouldn't have to be a building. You wouldn't have to move it during a hurricane. If you put a trailer, which would be a cheaper alternative initially from the capital side, then of course that would have to be moved in the event of a hurricane. So it depends on the site, and then it depends on the size of investment that you're willing to make initially, versus perhaps in 20 years you might make a different decision. But just again on this, I think Kathy made a good point earlier, and that is there's a lot of other marine operations run by municipalities that you could also look at on this matter and see what they did and why, as perhaps as some guidance of what we should consider going forward.
That space under the bridge, do we just lease that from the state?
We have a 25-year agreement with the state that specifies exactly what we can utilize that space for.
Can we utilize it? Go ahead, Ray.
Kathy, you mentioned earlier that you were waiting forever to get some numbers that weren't forthcoming or whatever. What numbers were those?
Well,
I'm the new kid here on the
okay.
block.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what you're talking
Kathy,
about.
could I respond to that?
please.
The committee has received, since 2009, monthly reports of the revenues and the split with the revenues with the state. We have been trying since 2012 to get the expense side of that. Unfortunately, the expense side of our expenses go into a lump in the general fund, and it's very difficult to figure out what's our expense and what's somebody else's expense. And I have been trying to get a specific, report broken down of what our expenses are, and have been unable to do so. We have just gone through a presentation where our monthly statistics are in huge variance with what Mr. Lang has in his database. And I don't know where we go from there, but
So those numbers are from the state?
No,
They're from
the numbers
town.
that we have been put in by staff on a monthly basis since 2009. I don't know what staff member does that and whether that data goes on to the new database or not.
I can tell you that staff member has changed multiple times since 2009.
Right.
Yes, but we have a breakdown, literally every transaction on a spreadsheet. Maybe people changed, but it's been the same format, and it's been very consistent. And the amount of money that comes in is very proportional to the occupancy. The figures coming from the system, they're out of kilter. I mean, the occupancy goes up and the income goes down, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm sure it's all right, but it certainly doesn't make sense since I've been graphing this for 6
Well, and the
years or
report
so.
we got from Mr. Lang was very different in the expenses from the reports we've been getting for
No,
several years.
No, the income, not the
The income?
We didn't have any expenses to compare. It's the income that was
Well,
different.
I went back with
And we
several
don't-
other graphs that we've gotten over the years about expenses, and part of the problem with the expenses for the mooring field is we don't have a full-time person, so some of the personnel expenses are part-time and they come from several different places, and it's hard sometimes to get the real direct expenses because of that.
Well, and they're allocated differently. And at one time, we had a Marine grant for law enforcement, and it covered more than just the
mooring field. We were paying for the
but that was
water
covered.
police for the whole island.
Yeah, but that we weren't paying for it. The grant was paying
Right.
for it, and so it
hard
was
to
no
figure.
skin off our teeth to do that. So the point is that the numbers are approximate when we talk about our income, but I don't think they're approximate because they've been filled in on a monthly basis and they're consistent. Our expenses we have no real idea about other than what's reported to us, and I don't know what to make of those.
So let me see if I can help. So on the expense side, we don't have a cost center because we don't have, first of all, we don't have a large enough staff, and we don't have other than, even Austin is not 100% on the mooring field. So we have employees billing their time, so their expenses are basically based on what they bill. So it's not where we have a cost center set up for the expenses. On the revenue side, it's very easy. We have audited numbers, and those are the numbers, notwithstanding what may appear in a spreadsheet that someone gives somebody. So, whether those reconcile to numbers that were previously given to the committee or not, I don't know, but they are what they are. But those revenues are part of the town's audit, and as part of our audit process, we, at least on the revenue side, because that is a direct place where the revenues go, that's balanced to the penny every year as we complete the audit.
Roger, if you have, I mean, I find it hard to believe that we can't produce even a pretty darn close estimate of a cost, a workable estimate of a cost. Because even though
Well,
Austin,
no one's saying that we can't, but I think what they're saying is that they received a series of numbers that said A, and now they're receiving a series of numbers that say B, and they can't account for the differences. I'm just trying to give a explanation.
maybe Mr. Lang could meet with you all at your next meeting.
He was
Met
there
with us yesterday.
He met with you yesterday.
He's still working on it.
Okay.
We're still in communication.
It's still okay. All right. Well, let's hope that gets. Mr. Lang is your finance director.
Finance director.
He's very nice and competent, more importantly.
Yes.
So, so does this need further? This needs further investigation.
We need
by,
further
okay. Anybody
talking
have
in our
anything else
committee, I believe,
to
at this
input
point.
on this issue before we move on? We'll go on to the next one, Kathy.
Well, there were some concerns, not at our last meeting, but the meeting before, I guess, about the dinghy dock behind Tops. And am I correct that we heard a rumor that people were talking about they wanted to close the dinghy dock?
I think it was mentioned.
It was mentioned.
Yes.
And because of, some of the concerns back there. Part of the reason why there was a dock put in there, well, it's not a dinghy dock, it's a kayak launch, was put in there was because people have been landing there for years.
Since the beginning of time.
Since the beginning of time. And by,
That's
well,
right.
yeah,
Or
or
Casey's,
Casey's,
whichever
whichever
came
came
first.
So putting a structure in there helped some. There are still issues, obviously. And closing the dock would not solve those issues. And
I personally don't think we should close the dock. You're
So-
right. It doesn't solve anything.
it doesn't solve anything because people will be landing there anyway. So
Anybody else have any comments on that?
I have
Austin,
one.
do you? Or Chelsea?
I just have one. We're working on getting some quotes together for additional lighting back there right
Excellent.
now and at the rec center.
Super.
Excellent.
Ever since, when it was first built, it was a huge issue with loitering over there and people coming over there as kind of a congregating spot. In the last couple months, though, with, I guess, some things that's been happening on the island, usually Sheriff's Department has really cleaned that area up. There is one gentleman that kind of still hangs out there, and we talked to him to move along. But other than that, I mean, it is now known as a spot not to hang out at. So it's totally reversed its standings on what it used to be and the people that used to congregate there. And my staff and I have taken a little more into kind of keeping that area cleaned up and monitored every morning. And we've been power washing it and everything a lot more than it has been in the past. And just having movement there from town staff and the Sheriff's Department has really helped keep people out of there.
Yeah.
So here in the last months, probably right now we could walk over there and there's nobody there. So it's really cleaned itself up. And especially ever since Tops closed, that was a big point for people to come over there and hang out as well. So I can just say that it has cleaned itself up, and I don't think that it is an issue. As far as myself involved, as the problems that I used to get in there, there's no issues that I have to deal with as of today.
good.
Good.
Glad to hear it.
Anybody have anything else on that item?
Yeah, that's a great access for Town Hall, for the library, and for Bay Oaks, and that's one of the best things about it. It's definitely an easy get to for all these places.
Yeah. Okay. Other items from any Anchorage Advisory Committee members?
I might mention something that's sort of halfway in our purview. Many of you are aware that when you try to come in Matanzas Pass, that there are a lot of boats, and some of them are throwing big wakes well into the pass at the end of the island. The Coast Guard received a complaint of an individual who was coming through in his boat, and a large boat threw a big wake, and his passenger broke their arm. There have been multiple problems in that area, and some years ago the county tried to get the slow wake zones moved westward. They went through a lot of process and were unable to get it done.
Why was that?
I am not exactly sure, but it was both political and other. But the county is now working on this, and in the long run, it's going to need the strong support of the council to encourage that those signs be moved further westward, and anything we can do to encourage that. They're really working on it hard, but it includes at least 4 or 5 different agencies, all of which whom have to agree. It's a federal channel, it's state waters, it's Fort Myers Beach area, it's FWC, and Corps of Engineers, and I can't remember, and DEP, and they all have to agree. So you wonder why it didn't happen before, as they finally gave up. But I think they may work this time, and I ask that the council be aware and, when asked, do whatever they can to encourage this being done.
Would a resolution or anything from the council now be of any assistance?
I'm not sure. In the long run, it comes up to ordinance, but they're not ready for that yet. But I hope you'll be ready when the time comes.
I'd make some comment about that. Cape Coral was trying to expand their idle zones. Recently, I don't know if everybody read that or not. And they ran into a buzzsaw with the bureaucracies that says, well, you can't do that. And I called because I tried to get an idle zone expansion where I live on the lagoon, where it's an aquatic preserve and we get manatees and stuff back there. And we don't have an idle zone there. And I talked to Lee County and so on, and they said, idle zones are not for the protection of property or safety. They're for the protection of manatees.
That's quite true. There is one law that they have found which includes safety.
Well, at this point, that's what I was told controls the idle zones in this area. And as far as my lagoon's concerned, they said the manatee situation there is only seasonal, and if you were to get a idle zone there, it would just be on a seasonal basis if you could go through all that. So, and then you could investigate what Cape Coral went through, because they have several intersections, people are getting damaged and things, and they tried to get idle zones put in, and it was thrown back in their face.
Chelsea?
Just touching on what Mr. Lawwell brought up, it was brought to our attention. Austin is working with all the other agencies on forward progress and getting that done. So if there is some action that council is required to take, we will be bringing that to you as soon as possible because of the incident that occurred.
Great. Anybody else?
I have a question concerning this issue. What role, it's my understanding that's our federal pass. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Right. So I think a resolution or some direction from the committee, or the council rather, saying that we would be in agreement with it. I've been in and out of that many times, passing larger boats. In a small sailboat can sometimes be quite exciting. But what role do we have locally with that? Because since that's a federal pass, isn't going to take all these other entities to make that happen. I mean, we can encourage it, but I don't know that we are the ones who will make it happen other than from an encouraging point of view,
That's, yeah, well, go ahead.
I don't know if this will apply, but the town does have a statute within the town's laws that there's no wake within 300 feet of any state, county, or town park. Now, that's our statute here in town. So I don't know if that'll apply.
Bowditch Park?
Yeah, to Bowditch Park. And if we can somehow push that over to the federal level to say we have a state statute here stating that we have no wake within 300 feet of any town, state, or federal park. I don't know if that'll apply, and we can bring that to the attention of the state.
That's a good idea.
But that's one ordinance we do have on the books.
Austin, is a no-wake zone and an idle zone technically the same thing?
Yeah, it is. It's a slow speed zone and idle zones.
Slow speed and idle.
Slow speed and idle.
Let me say that the county individual is working on this very hard and is not ready for anybody else to do something right now, and what I'm asking is we're standing by when she asks that we jump in.
So Chelsea, you'll bring that to us as soon as we need to do something.
Excuse me, could I just read this?
Yeah.
This was the article with Cape Coral and their canals. It says, the state says no law regulating waterways can be passed for the purpose of noise abatement or shoreline protection, and that the wake resulting from the reasonable and prudent operation of a vessel is a force which should be anticipated by the owners of the property adjacent to the navigable waters of this state.
Yeah.
And that's what till Cape Coral. So they're up in Tallahassee lobbying and trying to get changed.
Yeah, there's one workaround that may or may not work, and that's where we're at now, so we don't want to make a big thing, but we don't have others that are going to complain, but that's exactly what happened to the last one.
Probably not. Anybody else have any other items? Sam?
I have two really quick items. After talking to a lot of people on the Anchorage, and I think everybody in here agrees, I just want to thank Austin for doing a great job, being really competent and professional, and that's all we ever hear about you, and the same goes for Chelsea.
That is all we ever hear.
And yay. And the second and most important is our Cruisers Appreciation Day is coming up Saturday, April 6th at Matanzas, and all members of council and staff get free drink and eat tickets, so please show up if you can.
Yeah. Okay, so does anybody else have anything?
To a limit, $7.
I know you're trying to get out of here. I just have a couple updates regarding some grants that we are trying or have received for the mooring field. We did get approval from FBIP, Florida Boating Improvement Program, to move forward with the construction plans for the expansion of the digging dock underneath the bridge and remodel of that. So in the next month or so, those will go out to bid. We are in the next stage of the boating infrastructure grant, big grant, which is a federal. So we're in line for that, and then we're waiting to hear back for the WCIMD grant that we apply for every year for the additional law enforcement marine patrol. So there's lots of stuff going on in the mooring field.
That's great.
You guys are doing a great job with grants throughout the town on all the topics, Chelsea, but thank you very much for that.
So, Chelsea, before we adjourn, I just want to ask you and Austin and Roger, could you help this gentleman that came in today before,
Let me say that Chelsea has been wonderful in helping me with all the numbers, and that's the reason we're getting somewhere when I haven't in the last 5 years. So I think that
Chelsea is wonderful, period.
She has spent a lot of time with me and has been very supportive, and I really appreciate her help.
And while we're on the accolades, thank all of you on the Anchorage Advisory Committee for volunteering your time and your talent, your expertise. It's greatly
I'd also like to comment, if I may. As the one member here, I think, who was on the original committee, I remember meeting in Casey's Alley. That was an interesting sort of time.
You could do your laundry while you were there.
Absolutely. Of course, it didn't smell any better than when you brought it in, but that was another issue. But having said that, I think we should all be pleased that I remember what the Back Bay was like when I used to sail in here when I lived in another community. And I think we should all be quite pleased with what has happened. We do have a very successful mooring field that is well respected by cruisers and others alike. And I think what we're looking at doing is fine-tuning it a bit, and I think that should be our goal. But I just wanted to say that we've done a pretty darn good job since about, 2004 or whatever it was.
Excellent.
I see you're looking at the fountain. Is that Bayfront Park?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you could please take our input on some of that, maybe we could be helpful.
Yes.
That is a very exciting development.
Yes,
Just
sure
turn
is.
it into town council. It'd be great.
Yes. Okay. If there's nothing else, Kathy? No. We'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? You know what, motions to adjourn don't require a second anyway. Here, we're done. It's 2:19, and this meeting is concluded. We will reconvene at 2:30 for a Marine Resource Task Force meeting.